morning. Today is Friday, May 23rd. Welcome to the Public Safety Committee. I'm Vice Chair, Councilmember Joe Buscaino. I'm joined by Councilmember Mitchell Farrell. Our esteemed chair is waiting on General Services and suffered a flat tire. So please, he's safe, he's fine, but he's waiting on a tire repair. So please keep him in your prayers as his GSD arrives. I'm going to run today's committee meeting and start with general public comment and invite up Antonia Ramirez. Antonia here? Then we'll go through the agenda.
Good morning.
Good morning. 2 minutes. Thank you.
Okay. One moment, please. This is a matter of principle. There are high crimes being committed in the UCLA and Westwood Wilshire corridor at an alarming rate, and the West Los Angeles Police Department has yet to tackle these problems. One main problem is that the UCLA and the high-rise buildings are engaged in unlawful hiring practices of criminal illegal felons and Latino Chango gangbangers and African-American drug dealers and pimps and Iranian criminal terrorists and the criminal ring and white trash junkies. Consequently, these wicked and diabolical deviants have created an unsafe and hostile environment for the students at UCLA and the residents and tenants throughout that area. Here is a partial list of unsafe, unsanitary, and high-crime buildings. The following high-rise buildings with full services are located at 10490 Wilshire Boulevard, Los Angeles, California, 90024. And the next one is 10501 Wilshire Boulevard, Los Angeles, California, 90024. And the next one, it's 10551 Wilshire Boulevard, Los Angeles, California, 90024. And the noisy, unsafe, and drug criminal haven for psychopaths is the Wilshire Marquee, and that's located at 10535 Wilshire Boulevard, Los Angeles, California, 90024. The following condo units are pedophiles, drug dealers, organized crime, gang stalkers, harassers, and committing home invasion robberies. They are Deck 05 and unit number 504 and unit number 605 and unit number 704 and unit number 1604 and unit 1004 and unit 804. And again, these are drug dealers. These buildings are drug infested, and the Latinos peddle the drugs in the buildings. Thank you.
Okay. Let's move on to the agenda. We're going to take on consent. And John, can you explain, because we don't have a quorum, we don't have to take public comment or speaker cards on these items?
That's correct, Councilman. John White, City Clerk. Anytime you don't have a quorum of your committee, you can still take an action as a communication, but you're not obliged to offer public comment.
Okay.
Instead, that public comment will have to occur in council.
Okay. Let's take on consent. If I don't hear any objection from Mr. O'Farrell, item number 2, the extension of Ms. Burton's appointment as interim GM of Emergency Management. Ms. Burton, thank you for your service here today. Okay, thank you so much for your ongoing service. We're going to take this item on consent and move forward on item number 2. Item 3 on consent, 4, 5, 6, 7. I do have cards on 8. We'll hold 8 on the desk. We'll take item 9 on consent. If I may, per the request of the chair, we're going to continue item 10. There's some questions Mr. Englander had on items 10. Item number 10. We'll continue item 10. Take item 11 and 13 on consent. Do have a speaker card on 12. And then we'll get to the special agenda after we get through today's regular agenda.
Committee members, items 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 have CA reports that were submitted after the publication of the agenda. Do you wish to approve those reports as part of your action this morning?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
Okay, so with that, we'll hear item number 1 first.
Very good. Item 1, communication from the mayor relative to the appointment of Mr. Raul Claros to the Police Permit Review Panel for the term ending June 30, 2016, to fill the vacancy resulting from the removal of Mr. Ricky Gelb from the panel.
Mr. Gelb, hi,
Hey.
good morning.
Morning.
I know you've been very active in our city and just a huge advocate to find everything you can to improve the quality of life in the city of Los Angeles. Tell us a little bit about yourself and why you want to take on this role.
Thank you, Mr. Buscaino. Name's Raul Claros. I'm a proud product of Pico Union, proud Central American. My mother's from Costa Rica. My dad's from El Salvador. So to grow up, part of Generation X and first to graduate from college for my family and now to be able to serve in this capacity for the city of Los Angeles is definitely a humbling experience. I've been able to briefly spend some time with Richard and some of the folks to tell me exactly what the expectation is. I'm very clear as far as the realm of work, the time of commitment that is required, and I look forward to getting through this process and starting, I believe, my first meeting on June 4th.
Thank you, Mr. Gelb. Mr. O'Farrell, any questions? No. Okay. Without any objection, we'll approve this appointment of Mr. Ricky Gelb to serve on the Police Permit Review Panel.
To Mr. Claros. That's approving Mr. Claros.
I'm sorry. Sorry.
No problem.
We had, this is item 1. Claros, sorry. I have the another. Oh, I'm actually referring to the special item 1. So, Mr. Claros, yes, congratulations.
Thank you very
and we'll
much.
see you in council.
All right. Thank you.
Oh, you don't? Oh. Gotcha. You have the special one? Yes, I do. Okay. Item number 2, please. I'm sorry, we took item 2 on consent.
Sir.
Let's, what are we doing on? Let's move to item number 14, and we have a speaker on item number 14. If I can invite Mr. Frank Lima, speak on item number 14.
Item 14, motion England or Bonin relative to directing the LAFD to report to the Public Safety Committee with regard to the 9/11 dispatch issues raised by the recent county civil grand jury report and related matters.
Morning, Councilman. Thank
Morning.
you for the time. Frank Lima, President, United Firefighters of Los Angeles City. I want to thank the committee who continue to show that public safety and restoration of the fire department is a top priority. We have been the most decimated department in the city over the last several years. I'm here today to discuss the flawed and misleading recommendations in both the PA report and the civil grand jury report, but specifically as it pertains to civilianizing our dispatchers. It's critical to note that firefighters agree with 3 out of the 4 recommendations of the grand jury report. Grand jury report recommended that we restore the LAFD staffing levels to the 2008 staffing levels. It recommended that we upgrade our technology and recommended that we allow more flexibility for our dispatchers. UFLEX strongly agrees with all 3 of these recommendations. In fact, we absolutely agree with the following statement that was written word for word in the grand jury report, and that is the most crucial and most obvious impediment to adequate response times is the budget issue. Once funding of the LAFD was reduced, response times began to rise. UFLAC is not inherently opposed to the merging of the LAFD and LAPD computer-aided dispatch systems. However, we must proceed with caution. Similar upgrades and mergers in New York, Boston, Long Beach, San Francisco, and many other cities have wasted millions of dollars on failed systems and, most important, had a negative impact on public safety. This is not an easy issue, but it's one that UFLAG is willing to discuss in good faith. As for the recommendation to staff our dispatch center with civilians, we are absolutely opposed to this change. Studies have shown it'll be even more it will not be cost effective, and public safety will be impacted. I want to thank you very much for your time, and thanks for your careful consideration in these matters.
Thank you, Mr. Lino. If we can get fire department to report on this item, thank you. Joined by Councilmember Mary Martinez, and with that, we do now have a quorum. Thank you.
Good morning, Don Frazier,
Morning.
Chief Deputy with the Fire Department. With respect to the recommendations submitted by the grand jury report, 2012-2013 report, recommendation 8.2 that the LAFD should incorporate civilians as call handlers in its dispatch center. The first step in this is underway, and that first step is the evaluation of CAD for either replacement, upgrade, or merger with the LAPD's CAD. Right. So that would be the first step. Once that evaluation is done, then we would look at the civilianization question. The second recommendation, that would be recommendation 8.3, that LAFD should use a customizable emergency medical dispatch protocol to allow for call handler flexibility and responding to 911 calls. That flexible system is currently under development, and we're expecting to have that completed around December.
Okay. What's the potential? Okay.
Go ahead if you have a
question. As far as a potential timeline, that's we need to act before we potentially face litigation. Do we know that?
Well, we've reached out and asked to sit and discuss with the current emergency medical dispatch protocols system that we use, and we're looking to establish that dialogue. Our contract with them expires in December.
So we need to act before December, you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, this is first priority for the department right now.
Okay.
And then finally, with recommendation 8.4, that we update our technical equipment and its vehicles as outlined in November 12 report. That's in progress. That's the AVL program, and that's expected to be completed by July of 2015. Okay. With respect to the PA consulting report, page 17, they also recommend that we replace, upgrade, and merge our CAD with LAPD as described under the recommendations for the ground jury. That's in progress. With respect to the PA consulting report called to civilianize call-taking positions at the dispatch center, again, we would undertake that once our evaluation for the CAD is complete. And with respect to the recommendation from PA Consulting on AVL, it's just as I reported, that that's in progress.
Okay. So. Colleagues, questions? Good. Per the direction, Mr. Englander would like to direct the CLA. Mr. Matias here?
Yes.
Hello. Good morning.
Yes. Good morning.
Hi, I'm drinking for you.
Sorry about that.
So it'd be the direction of the chair and this committee to work and convene a meeting between priority dispatch and the fire department prior to going quickly prior to this item going to council. It's been the chair, Mr. Englander, wants to ensure that some of the glitches are taken care of before it gets to council. So
okay.
In a timely manner, though, that'd be the direction.
Yes, the CLA will do so.
Okay, but it is, we do want to move this quickly to council, unless I hear any objections.
What is the direction you're giving? I'm sorry, I'm not
Just
clear.
to have the CLA convene a meeting with priority dispatch and the fire department. There continues to be some miscommunication between all parties.
You want to convene the meeting before the item gets to council?
Yes, yes.
Yes, we'll do so.
And what's the timeline? When are we supposed to hear this in council?
How quickly can we get this to council?
Well, did you want to wait to see if the CLA can convene a meeting and resolve the issues before you set a date? We could set a date certain for council if you like. I don't know how much time the CLA will need to meet with the fire department.
I would think a week or two would, at most.
Okay.
I'll wait to hear back from the CLA before we set a date.
Very good.
And once I do, then we'll set a council date.
Okay. No more than 2 weeks, so.
Is the action then to approve the motion?
Approve the motion.
pending
Right.
report?
We'll approve the motion and set the date for council after you hear from Mr. Matias.
I'll do that.
Okay. No longer than 2 weeks.
Mr. Chair, just to clarify, it would be setting a date pending the meeting with LAFD, UFLAG,
And priority dispatch.
Priority Dispatch. Are we amenable to that?
You want to add that? We good?
You wanted UFLAG also?
I don't know,
included?
you're suggesting to include UFLAG?
I mean, since it's a real issue for the rank and file, I would recommend that they're part of that discussion.
I'm good with that. Ms. Martinez?
So the 1 to 2 weeks that you're asking for, is that to set up the meeting between all parties before it goes to council, or is that when you want to bring the item to council? What do you need 1 or 2 weeks for?
It's my understanding it would be for us to have time to meet with them at least once, so when it does hit council, we'd have something to report
Very good.
as far as what the issues are.
That'll be the order?
Yes.
Very good.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Item 15.
Item 15, Transportation Committee and LADOT reports relative to a contract with Siemens Industry Incorporated for emergency repair and replacement of automated surveillance and control camera and changeable message signs for the automated traffic surveillance and control system closed circuit camera replacement program.
Good morning. Good morning. Sean Skian from the Department of Transportation.
Good morning, Dan Gomez from Los Angeles Police Department.
Morning, Sarge.
Morning.
Did you have any specific question for us, or would you like me to just do a brief overview?
Give us a brief overview, and then we have a couple questions.
Okay, very good. About a year ago, we met in this committee and to go over the use of ADSAC cameras for LAPD after the Boston bombings. As a result of that original meeting, we looked at our traffic signal camera system, and we determined that we have a fairly sizable number of failures of the cameras in the city. We have about 500 cameras, and currently almost 150 of them are not working. So we began the process of identifying a contractor that could do the work to repair all the cameras and bring them up to full operational status. And we prepared a report and submitted it through the Transportation Committee to that effect, which approved it and moved it forward to Council. It was referred back to this committee, I think, for further discussion on how that project would relate to working with LAPD. And LAPD's here. I'll give just a brief overview from our part. We're fully partnered with LAPD in our efforts to restore the camera system. We share our video with their officers in their racer division and also at the Emergency Management Center. They're used during special events by both the DOT and the LAPD for surveillance and traffic control purposes. Obviously, our main interest is getting the cameras fixed is because we have such a large swath of cameras throughout the city that are out. We are handicapped in being able to monitor traffic. Situations develop and we're not able to address them, but that mirrors what LAPD would have too. If the cameras don't work, then they can't see anything either if something were to happen in that area.
Has LAPD reviewed and approved the specs on these specific cameras that we're talking about?
So, thank you, Council Member. So we did look at the proposal, and it is in line with current technology that's available.
Okay, good.
And to have these cameras back fully operational and available to racer would be a great advantage because quite often, as he mentioned, we're looking at the same events, the traffic flow for major incidents, for flow of traffic. So everything that we've seen would be right in line with what we're doing within the department standards.
And there are a number of cameras that are reported to be offline, is that correct?
Yes.
And do these specific cameras that are offline pose a threat to public safety?
Yes, we believe they do.
And these cameras that are not functional, have we noticed a spike in crime and quality of life issues, illegal dumping, violent crime? more of a CompStat question.
So, Councilmember, I guess I can address that. So, based on the list that was provided to us, we haven't done that analysis yet because they're specifically related to generally intersections. We'd have to take a broader look at that. We certainly could do that if you'd like. I think from our standpoint, assuming that this is approved, that having these back online as quickly as possible certainly would be a benefit and would help.
And as far as as we wait for the process to move through council, do we have any concerns about the list of growing as to work on the repairs of these cameras? Just like our streets, we continue to ignore our failed streets. We're going to have C streets going into the DNF streets.
Right, that is correct. The list continues to grow. As we went through this process, the list grew. That was a real concern of Councilmember Bonin in T Committee, that from the time we presented it till the time he got to hear it, we had already added another 8 or 10 cameras. Since even that meeting, we've now up to 146. Okay. We're doing a contract for 150, so I really don't want to get there. So I think urgency is
okay. Questions,
there.
Colleagues?
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. Where are the 150 cameras that are not turned on located?
I have provided your office with a list, but if you did not receive it, I have an additional.
You want to know how many are in my district? So
yes.
There's a total of 500. There's 150 that are not turned on. Is the software and the equipment all updated? Are you going to have any issues with that? And the reason I ask is because I have cameras installed in an underground, in a tunnel that's right underneath the main runway at Van Nuys Airport. You have cameras, but the software is so outdated that it does, I mean, even if you were to turn them on, you really can't see an image because the software's been so outdated. So are these cameras, is the software upgraded and the equipment's upgraded? All you need to do is turn it on?
No. In the situation of the traffic cameras, the cameras themselves have failed. The electronics in the camera have stopped working.
Replace the equipment.
We need to replace the equipment. And Bill, have you? Okay. A list is being provided to you of the ones in your district, and all of the council districts are on that list. These cameras have stopped working for a multitude of reasons. Many of them are very old. They've been damaged by wind and rain and other elements. And so we're replacing them with a more robust camera, one that's sealed from the elements and will last a lot longer. It's not a software issue.
There's 15 cameras in my district.
That's
and
correct.
About 2 months ago, the Daily News called Roscoe and Van Nuys Boulevard one of the most dangerous intersections in the San Fernando Valley.
Yes. That's why we want to get.
How long has the camera been off?
I don't have the dates of when any individual camera failed, but I think that the Roscoe and Van Nuys has been out for a while.
And that's why we're here.
That's why we're here, yeah.
You know, I share your frustrations, Ms. Martinez. I know this list that's provided by us, there's some key intersections in my district as well. But to know that we're moving forward on this item and working with Siemens to fix this, and know that Department of Transportation is working with LAPD on the specs to feed through RACER is something that it's long overdue, and I'm glad we're moving forward on this. Mr. O'Farrell?
Just, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one technical correction. The camera location at Sunset and Portia is in the 13th District, not the 1st.
Okay.
It's a shared boundary, but the actual signalization connects the 13th District streets.
Okay.
Technical correction.
Yeah, we realized there was another mistake on the report too. We'll try to get all those corrected. We put this together quite quickly yesterday.
Yeah.
And let me caution colleagues that this is a confidential list. We don't want these knuckleheads to know where these are non-working cameras.
That's exactly right. We would.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sergeant Gomez, anything you want to add?
No, sir. Thank you.
We're good? Okay, so with that, we'll approve item 15 and move this item forward. And thank you so much for working together. I want to thank our chair, Mr. Englander, for moving this and leading the effort in problem solving and making sure these cameras are functional and most importantly have a direct feed into the police department. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 16.
Item 16, motion Buscaino Blumenfield, relative to instructing the LAPD to report on the current enforcement standards regarding registered sex offenders, the level of LAPD resources devoted to enforcement and compliance efforts, the impacts of residency restrictions under Proposition 83 and neighboring cities, and potential recommendations to strengthen the city's monitoring and enforcement ability.
Thank you. Commander Hayes, how are you? Thank you for being here. We're going to make you commander. Where's that list at? Doggone it.
Thanks, Councilman.
Thank you so much for your hard work and running this critical division in the police department. And this is an issue that you and I worked together when you led and commanded the harbor area on registered sex offenders. We found a huge infiltration, and we found that the harbor area was a dumping ground on just a high number of registered sex offenders. And I'm glad you're at this position now that you're continue to address it and work with your colleagues on a countywide basis. You want to share some thoughts before we dive into a couple questions?
If you'd like, I can go over a number of things. You had requested a formal report, which is currently before the Police Commission. It was to be reviewed on Tuesday, this coming Tuesday, because of the holiday. That's been postponed. But I can go over some numbers, specifically things that you had asked the last time, and give you a further update on numbers for the city. Just to go over give you an understanding again of the requirements. Under 290A of the Penal Code, sexual predators convicted of certain crimes have to register as sex offenders within the state of California. Those requirements include that 5 days after release they have to register, 5 days after their birth date they have to register again each year, and within 5 days of moving they have to register. There are certain categories that require other specifics. Those of transients, individuals that do not have a permanent residence on file, have to register every 30 days, and sexual violent predators have to register every 90 days, in addition to the other compliances that they are required to. In the City of Los Angeles, we currently have 7 REACT teams, is what we call them, registration teams. There is one in each one of the bureaus, those for Valley, West Bureau, and Central Bureau. South Bureau has assigned it to the individual commands, those being 77th, Southeast, Southwest, and Harbor, for a total of 35 officers assigned to the detail. Well, I have one REACT coordinator assigned to Robbery Homicide Division that looks at it throughout the city and coordinates those efforts. That individual has been with me for several years, and she is currently retiring. But what I did, because of the emphasis we want to place on...
Did she stay on drop?
This is the end of her drop.
It's a valuable resource.
D3 Diane Webb has been with us for a long time, and many of you have spoken to her and was intimately involved in this and knew it to a great deal. But what we did was, to avoid losing her expertise, I was able to get the managed hiring board to allow us to hire a new D3 in that position and get an overlap, so she'll have about 3 months with him before he leaves. And that individual was Lauren Rauch, who ran the Valley REACT program. The other nice thing about that is because of the size of Los Angeles, we actually have an individual, that being will now be Lauren Rauch. It was formerly Diane Webb on the California Sex Offenders Management Board. So we've got an input in it. To give you an idea,
explain the roles and responsibility of sitting on that board.
It looks at It doesn't look at it just regionally. It looks at it statewide and can have a bearing, and I'll talk about that later on, where other cities or counties may not be in compliance or doing things that are detrimental to the entire state, to bring them in line and make them follow the rules and regulations of Jessica's Law.
Got it.
Okay. To give you an idea, the REACT teams that I spoke to, completed over 12,000 documents regarding registration for 5,769 registrants in the city of Los Angeles. They did 1,300 compliance checks, and of those, they were able to find 301 individuals that failed to meet registration requirements and were incarcerated as a result of those failures. There's the total number of registrants in Los Angeles, as I indicated, is 5,679. And because of the parole status of those individuals, there's only an assessment done on essentially 25% of the individuals that meet the requirements for assessments. Of those, an average of 10% are considered high risk. So what you end up with is about 1,442 sexual registrants are assessed every year as to their as
Based
to
on the
risk
crime that they committed.
Based on the crime they committed. When they're released, not all individuals that are 290 registrants are on parole or probation. And of those, there's only a percentage, and that usually breaks down to about 25%. Of that 25%, those individuals are evaluated as to their risk. And as we indicated, 10% normally is what you find to be the average for high-risk individuals. Specifically for Los Angeles City, there are 122 that are considered high risk. And within the city of Los Angeles, there are 7 sexual violent predators. Those are individuals that have committed crimes previously, repeated those crimes, and are considered an extreme risk to the community.
And you're monitoring them on a consistent basis? The 7 and the 122?
Yes, we're monitoring all of them. We're monitoring all of them, but in particular the 122 and the 7 that we're talking about, we monitor those on a regular basis. Rather than just doing one compliance check on them, we would do repeat compliance checks.
So aside from the repeat compliance checks, what other?
They all have varying restrictions and monitoring. Most of those, when you get into the 122 and the 7 that I talked about being the number of high risk and sexual violent predators, all of them will have issues like GPS on them. They'll also have other compliance stuffs like Alcohol Anonymous, other programs that they have to go to, including meetings with mental health workers, there's curfews, there's all of those things, but they're individuals. So to tell you specifically what each one has, I can't, but all of them have increased restrictions other than just the residency aspect of it. Okay. To give you more numbers, there are 512 transient individuals that are 290 registrants in the city of Los Angeles. Not all of those are on parole or probation. Of those, 124 are on probation. 42 are considered high risk, and there are no transient sexual predators, which is a significant issue because once you get to the transient sexual violent predators, you have no idea where they are. So you want to be able to make sure that you have a specific residence or location where they reside so that you can go check on them. I know in the last meeting, specifically, Councilman Buscaino, Councilman Bonin, who isn't on the committee any longer, and Councilman O'Farrell asked for numbers specific to their areas. So what I did was I prepared those. Because the councilmatic districts don't align specifically with the geographic areas for the divisions, and to be able to find the residences of all of these individuals would be difficult to say the least. What I did was I broke it down on the major areas that are covered. So for Councilman Buscaino, I looked at both Harbor and Southeast. So the numbers may be slightly inflated for your specific council district, but they're the 2 geographic areas that are predominant for your areas. So for those Harbor has 439 sexual registrants that reside in that area, as well as Southeast, which has 497 for a total of 936. You have 16 high risk in Harbor, 15 high risk in Southeast, is for a total of 33, and there's 1 sexual violent predator that resides in Southeast Division. There are no high risk transients, as I've spoken to before. For Councilman O'Farrell, I looked at Hollywood and Northeast areas. Hollywood has 135 transient and 226 transient for Northeast for a total of 361. You have 2 high risk individuals that live in Northeast Division, and you have no sexual violent predators, and you have 1 high risk transient that lives in Northeast, or last registration was in Northeast. I know you mentioned Van Nuys, but I'm not sure what other area specifically would be geographic area for you. I can check for you, Councilman Martinez.
Well, my district in particular, is there anything in the law that talks about when these folks are released into the public, so that we don't end up with an overconcentration of these individuals in a particular area or region?
There is nothing in the law that speaks to that. I can speak specifically to issues that I addressed when I was the commanding officer in Harbor area in Councilman Buscaino's district. When we were there, when I was assigned there, which was from 2007 to 2012, in 2009 and 10, we saw a significant increase in the number of sexual registrants that were moving into the area, particularly into the Harbor Gateway and the Wilmington area. The reason for that was that under the residency restrictions, and for Jessica's law, they can't live within a certain distance of either a school or a park. Both those areas have high concentrations of apartment buildings with minimal parks and schools in the specific areas, so they were able to put individuals in there. There was also a problem in that the adjoining areas, in particular Long Beach, and some other cities had put in more stringent restrictions, residency restrictions. So the individuals that would normally be released to those areas were going to particularly Wilmington and Harbor City because of the dynamics of those areas. As what we did down there was work specifically with parole and talked to them and looked at finding other areas so that we weren't continually getting them released to that area. Parole worked with us and began to distribute them through other areas. As the other thing as I spoke, we went to the management board for the state and talked to them as well. And areas that weren't accepting them before and had the residency restrictions, and we pushed them to allow them back into the areas, and the parole board got them back into those areas rather than the concentration. We did see a reduction in Harbor. Harbor at that point in time was the highest in the city for registrants. What we did was...
there's a way to change the law. These communities have an abundance of overconcentration of liquor licenses and strip clubs and you name it. And to add an additional burden on these communities, I just think it's unfair. Do you know if pimps who are prosecuted for trafficking minors have to register as sex offenders in the state of California?
I believe they do.
You do?
I believe they do. It's a sex crime, and then all of those sex crimes require registration.
What about an individual who's solicited an underage child?
That is
also, they also have to register as sex offenders?
Yes.
Lieutenant Long gave the thumbs up.
Yes.
Said yes.
Yes, for the pimps.
Why don't you come forward?
Lieutenant Long is assigned to a robbery homicide division with me, and he specifically works the human trafficking section, so he can speak to those.
Good morning, Lieutenant.
Good morning. Good to see you again.
Good to see you, sir.
For that particular issue, it's under 236 of the Penal Code. The human trafficking section made recently under Prop 35 made it a requirement that people convicted of human trafficking involving the sex trafficking have to register as sex registrants. So yes, as for the solicitation, I think that's more of a case-by-case basis depending on what they charge them with.
So they're picked up with a 13-year-old girl, for picking up a 13-year-old girl.
They should be required to do that.
They should be required.
But again, it ends up being what they're charged with, what they're convicted of in the courts, and then the courts will set the requirements for the registration.
We should work on that.
Yeah, it's a state approach.
We shouldn't have to tell men that it's not okay to pick up 13-year-olds.
Mm-hmm. Correct. The interesting statistic, though, nationally, if you're looking at it, is that only 93% of juvenile victims of sexual assaults were by individuals who knew them. 34% were actually by family members, and 58% were friends of family. The remaining 7% were actually by strangers. The studies that we've looked at have indicated that increased residency restrictions will not affect the recidivism by an individual or prevent the crimes. Specifically, there was a study that they looked at in it was in Minnesota. They looked at 224 victims of sexual assault, particularly juveniles, and only 16 of those were by strangers involving recidivism.
What we found, I'm sorry, you want to finish your report? Cap?
No, I had a couple of other things
Go ahead.
for you. The issues that you were looking at in terms of increased residency restrictions in the city of Los Angeles can be
Very similar to what we found in Long Beach and some of the beach cities in Orange County.
right. The ones that you were looking at can be done under Jessica's law. We don't see that they actually have a positive impact on the problem with the 290s. Actually, we think it has contrary effects. Those being that, as I indicated before, you get an increased transient population of sex offender registrants, and so that we have less of an ability to actually monitor their whereabouts and their activities and their compliance with the 290 requirements, also their probation requirements. The other issue with that is that they don't get the mental health care that they need as part of their treatment.
Right.
And the one thing we did find was that currently there is a 2009 stay by the California Supreme Court regarding the enforcement of those increased residency restrictions under Jessica's law. They're looking at it specifically out of a case out of San Diego versus People versus Mosley, where they're looking at whether it's compliance rather than being punitive with the increased residency restrictions. And so what I'm looking at is if you did add those residency restrictions, and it will automatically be litigated. There's a current one in Orange County as well, where Orange County instituted a rule that if a sexual registrant went into a park, they had to notify law enforcement before doing so. There was a case out of Fountain Valley. An individual went into the park for a company picnic. That was thrown out by the courts as being too restrictive. So the recommendations that I've come up with are that we do the continued compliance checks. As to the residencies that you were talking about before, I think the number of things that we did in Harbor can be done throughout the city, and that's looking at making sure that the locations where the individuals are staying, in particular in the apartment complexes that become problematic, that they're abiding by the rules and regulations that are associated with it. If there are problem locations, that we work with senior leads, in particular for those areas, the REACT teams and the city attorney's office to abate those locations, specifically looking at making sure that the landlord is complying with the issues that are addressed, and then ultimately, if they are not, moving them out. We did that in Harbor successfully with the Bonnie Lee and put some on the Flint hotels, which were two problem areas specifically in Wilmington. I would also recommend community education, and as I've offered before this board, we will gladly go out and do those to the community. I think that people need to know who's living in the community and that they're already there. And many of them are family and friends that they need to be aware of so that they don't have it. If you do the restrictions like I indicated, I think they'll be litigated automatically. And since the courts hasn't decided on the issues yet, you'll still have to wait to see what happens.
Do we sense a timeline on when the courts will decide?
No, I haven't heard from the court. It's what they're going to do. I think one of the things that we looked at, and with Senior Lead Cook out of Harbor area and your support out of the council office, Councilman Buscano, I think one of the things is when you get the high concentrations in the areas, as Council Martinez was talking about, you need to look at the community and do some of the things that will help that community, because there are probably services that are lacking in the first place. And what Harbor area did specifically in the Gateway began pocket parks. So
we had to build parks.
Made community efforts.
Isn't it? You find places in the city of Los Angeles, Cap, where communities that are park poor, that are school poor, and yet we're seeing a high concentration of registered sex offenders. That's what it's like we have to build parks to send the message.
You can't fault the city of Long Beach and even Orange County for trying to weed these people out of their communities. I mean, you can't fault them, but they're moving into ours. So why can't we do the same thing?
The problem with that is we're going to keep displacing them. They'll still end up in the city of Los Angeles. The problem that will happen is they will be registered as transients. And the problem with transients is they come in every 30 days. Wherever they are on that 30th day, they walk into a police station and they register. The second they walk out of that police station, there's no requirement that they remain in that area. So if you're talking about an individual that's high risk, as I've indicated, and we have no way of knowing where they are, then what happens is we have no way to see if they're complying with the rules and regulations, and if they aren't, have an ability to return them to incarceration. And the other aspect of that is that they are not getting the social services that they need to help them prevent the recidivism that may occur. I can't guarantee that recidivism won't occur, but if we put these things in effect, it gives us a little bit better opportunity to prevent it from occurring and address it if it does.
So at the same time, we don't want to create more transients. That's
the major thing. The more transients you have the less ability you have to address them, track them, and monitor them.
So having been involved in a number of task forces with parole, I get the importance of ensuring we need to know where they live so we can track them and continue with the compliance checks. But again, for us, in my district, we just saw an increase in concentration. I mean, we had one block of over 100 registered sex offenders in Harbor Gateway, and community was outraged. Even on Flint in Wilmington. So I get the importance of ensuring we need to know where they're at. But can we also work with the property owners that don't even live in the area who are cashing in from the state?
Well, I think that's part of what we talked about with the abatement issues, making sure that the areas are up to code and that they're looking at those type of things, and then if they aren't, abating it. And that's where we work with the property owner, and we did so in Harbor, with in particular the Flint Hotel and the Bonnie Lee. The other issue that I think you see now is originally when in 2007 through about 2012, the state was funding the individual when they came out and were placed on parole, so that the landlord was getting, if I recall correctly, $10,000 a month for rent. And if you had an apartment where you put several of those individuals, it was extremely profitable.
It's a moneymaker for
that. That has since been cut out, so they aren't receiving the funding. And so you're not seeing landlords as willing to step into it because it's not as profitable for them.
So obviously we need, is it Deputy Chief Margarita Perez from the County Probation Department? She's been very helpful in our district. She's amazing. Just want to, just a quick shout out to her and her team. It's the continued partnership and collaboration with the Police Department and in the Probation Department as well. You mentioned the importance of you working with senior lead officers this report, I believe, everyone should be aware of the numbers and the outreach working through neighborhood councils, through neighborhood watch groups, CPABs, and you made yourself available. But I'd like to see more of a plan from the police department to work with the senior lead officers across the city so that they can filter the information down to those through the neighborhood councils and also the neighborhood watch, business watch, CPABs as well.
That can be easily done. As I indicated before, the REACT programs, either in the South Bureau where they're division specific, or in the Bureau in the Valley, West, and Central Bureau where they're bureau wide. Those individuals are available to go to any community meeting and discuss the specifics for that community as to registrants, the issues that are addressed with that.
It's just that community outreach and the education that's critical here in sharing the information, because specifically in my district, there's an outrage of a high concentration of sex offenders. Mr. O'Farrell, I'll turn
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just so I'm crystal clear on this, first of all, thank you, gentlemen, and Captain Hayes. In terms of the high-risk, violent, registered sex offenders, can any of those be registered as transients?
Yes, they can.
They can.
They can, and that is the issue. It depends specifically on when they come out from parole or what the status of the parole is. There was one case that occurred in the Valley in 2014 or January of this year, where an individual was actually paroled from Ventura County Corrections and into Los Angeles City itself because that was his prior residence. And he had severe, what I would say are severe conditions on him in terms of GPS, attending AA meetings, so also curfews. Because what happened in that monitoring, because of his prior behavior and what he had done in previous crimes, that monitoring was closely done, and it resulted in him being violated very shortly after his release and return to incarceration, because simply he was out one evening and the GPS went off. He failed to return to his residence until several hours past his curfew, and his curfew was at 7 p.m., so it was early in the evening, and it also was determined that he had failed to meet with AA as required, so he was violated and returned.
Okay, and another just crystal clarification that I want, and that is, are all high-risk violent registered sex offenders monitored 24/7 by an electronic device, by GPS?
There are only 7 of them in the county, and yes, they are.
They all are, okay.
They are.
And county?
I'm in the city, I'm sorry.
City?
7
Okay,
in the city, yes.
And you mentioned, you just gave the example of what happened in January. How often does that occur with this small category that we're...
That's the only one that I'm aware of this
so it's
year.
a very unusual circumstance.
Again, their parole or probation may be violated for other reasons,
right?
But they're closely monitored, and those are the individuals that we check on them regularly. Plus, parole keeps track of them with the monitoring as well.
And is that monitored? Is that also monitored by the police 24/7? In other words, if a GPS tracking device goes off on one of these, okay,
No.
so they're near a school or a park, you're not necessarily going to catch that. It just depends on when you check in.
The police department does not receive active pinging on the GPS for them. The way it's done is it's done through parole, and parole monitors that. If it doesn't meet, if they violate a certain part of that, then we're notified from parole.
Are you comfortable that parole is adequately monitoring these particular category?
Those specific individuals, yes. As the high frequency are the sexual violent predators, as they are, because the numbers are significantly less.
Right.
And obviously, the risk to the community is significantly greater, so those are monitored much more closely than any of the others. And the process for them being released is significantly more. I mean, obviously, all of us would question how they can be released, but unfortunately, a number of them is through the psychiatric evaluation process that they're allowed to return to the communities.
Thank you.
Colleagues, my office looked at finding some more residential restrictions on those sex offenders that committed crimes against kids under 14 years old. And in working with Detective Webb, and she clearly indicated that, if we limit the residential restrictions of registered sex offenders, that we're not going to know where they're at. Therefore, we'll have issues with compliance checks. So I'm in favor of making sure that they have a roof over their head, so police, parole, probation know exactly where they're at for compliance checks. But again, a community shouldn't, a parent shouldn't explain to a child what an ankle bracelet is as they're taking their kids to and from school. This was just in response to the high concentration of registered sex offenders on specific streets in my district. I want to thank you for your report. And this continues to be an issue that impacts communities across the city, Los Angeles, across the county. I would like to hold this and maybe in 90 days give us an update on where the issue or the courts are at with the ongoing. Explain the court issue that you mentioned earlier.
Currently, there's a stay on the increased residency restrictions. The registry restrictions based on Jessica's law are in place, but the individual ones that are increased by the cities, which it gives, Jessica's law gives the individual cities and counties the ability to do, is what's on the stay right now. So we're monitoring that and we're following it through the courts. Primarily, it's based on the case out of San Diego, and we're continuing to work.
Okay, let's hold this and report back in 90 days.
Certainly.
And give us an update on that stay.
Certainly.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much, Cal. Thanks,
Thank you,
Lieutenant.
Councilman. Thank you.
Okay. So, let's see. Speaker cards on items 8, 12, and 15. Ms. Ramirez, I don't see her here. Oh, she is here.
Item 8, Board of Police Commissioners report and SEER report relative to the 2013 California Coverdale Program Grant Award in the amount of $77,994 from OES for use by LAPD's Scientific Investigation Division.
Okay, let me remind you to stay on the topic. Item number 8.
Thank you. Receiving the grant award in the amount of $77,994 for the use of the LAPD Scientific Investigation Division from October the 1st, 2013 through August 31st, 2014 is blatantly and outright theft and fraud and assuredly undeserved. Do clarify the LAPD Scientific Investigation Division for the period already specified. What scientific investigation division is there? Because up to now, I have never witnessed any investigations or follow-ups by your so-called detectives or investigators or any of your incompetent, inept, and lazy-ass police department officials, i.e., Rampart Division and the West Los Angeles Police Department, especially when these crimes involve property crimes, financial crimes, crimes to a person, i.e. harassment, gang stalking, toxic noise, vandalism, home invasion, robbery, domestic terrorism, hate crimes, and other malicious mischief crimes primarily committed by your Chango gangbangers and criminal illegals, Iranian terrorists, and Africans and African-American pimps and drug dealers, and white trash junkies. Moreover, to add insult to injury, the LAPD will demand two things from you when they take your incident reports. Number one, do you have proof? Did you see the crime take place?
Tie it into, this item's on SID, on Scientific Investigation Division. Tie it in.
Well, that's what I'm doing. And
Go ahead.
so hence, again, they're not doing their job. They're not supposed to be asking you if you have proof. That's their job. And again, hence, then there's no crime or any suspects to investigate in their twisted and corrupted logic, even though that's their job to investigate, i.e. like Dragnet. Remember the old movies, Dragnet? So why the second question that they will ask is, why don't you move? So my question to them is, why don't you quit and do us all a favor? Thank you.
Okay, we'll approve item 8 without objection.
Committee members, there's a SEER report for that item. Do you wish to approve that
Yes,
report?
please.
With this
Thank
item?
you.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll take item 12.
Item 12, LAPD report relative to the payment of a graffiti apprehension reward in the amount of $1,000 for the graffiti vandalism incident that occurred at 3809 DeLongpre Avenue on January 29th, 2014.
This was held due to a speaker card. Ms. Ramirez?
Thank you. We say no, no, and no to the $1,000 being paid as a reward for the graffiti vandalism incident that occurred at the address. First, but for the city's negligence, you have contributed to the Latino Chango gangbanging and criminal felon epidemic by not hiring ethical, intelligent, and non-gangbangers to the LAPD. And secondly, by not adequately and appropriately using the LAPD scientific investigation high-tech gizmos that we, the taxpayers, have paid with no avail to the out-of-control high crime rates. And thirdly, it's unfair and unjust to help one citizen when all legal law-abiding citizens have at one time or another suffered from graffiti vandalism with no recourse. Will the city pay all the aggrieved or injured parties $1,000 for the graffiti vandalism to their real property and or personal property? And that is the issue. I reserve my time. Thank you.
Okay, on that item, It's 12, right? Well, hearing no objection, we'll approve item 12 with this. Oh, yes. Note that we do have a quorum now. If we can add Ms. Martinez to all these items that were approved.
Previously approved.
Yes.
Very good. Thank you, Councilmember.
Thank you.
That concludes your consideration of
I'm
the
sorry, I have a
regular-
speaker card on 15. Do we need to reconsider 15?
Okay.
Let's reconsider 15. Bring Ms. Ramirez to speak on item number 15.
Again, very much, I thank you. I'm not clear with these automated traffic surveillances and control system closed-circuit cameras, ATSAC, replacement program. You would think that we could capture every graffiti vandal and or gangbanger or illegal felons and or Iranian terrorists committing crimes out on the streets, roads, highways, businesses, homes, alleys, parking structures, rooftops, apartment stairwells, condos, bus trains, railways, etc. Why do we have such high and heinous crimes every minute of the day? Is this high technology working for us, or is it working against us? Is this high-tech all-cost benefit? And if it is, explain to us how. And if it isn't, can we remedy the problems? We have an epidemic, ladies and gentlemen. We have a gangbanging epidemic. And many of us are embroiled in, as myself, we are in the midst of gang stalking. We are targeted individuals who are being gang stalked every moment of the day when we walk out of our own homes. We are asking for better surveillance. We are asking that you equip the police department and the investigators and the detectives with better technology to help all law-abiding citizens. I want to walk out of my house and not have to fear or fret or carry my apartment with me because I've got gangbangers breaking into my home. You are responsible. You are held to a higher standards, council members. Do something so when you go to your grave, you will say, voila, bravo, I did my job, fair and square. And that's what we say, huevos in Spanish. Do what is just, right, decent, and pure. Let's clean up Los Angeles and make it shine for the rest of the world. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So with that, we will adjourn the regular scheduled meeting and move on to today's special meeting. We have one item.
Special one, see a report relative to a contract with ASSI Security Incorporated for a term of 3 years with 2 additional 1-year extension options, and for an amount not to exceed $1 million for security systems upgrades and new equipment installations at LAPD facilities.
Very good. Any questions, colleagues, on this item? No. We're good? Okay. Hearing no objection, we'll approve special item number 1, special meeting item number 1. And we don't take public comment on this. Fantastic. So that was easy. We'll approve item 1 on the special meeting and adjourn the special meeting. And with that, public safety is adjourned for the day. We good? Thank you. Thank you all.